Welcome back to another Legendary Creature Spotlight, a series where we take a deep dive into a character's lore and see how that translates onto their card. Now, today's episode means a lot to me. This character held my very first commander deck, which ignited my ever-growing love for this game. Today we'll be looking at Chainer, the Dementia Master. What I'm really excited about is Chainer actually got a new card spoiled in Commander 2019, 17 years after his first card, to where his color identity went from mono black to black and red. Stick around to the end of the video to see my theory of why this color identity shift happened. With that said, we have a lot to cover, so let's begin. Now, before we can understand Chainer, we need to understand the Cabal. So the Cabal were a black-aligned organization in Dominaria. This organization worshipped the two true gods, money and profit. Now this was best done through their infamous Cabal fighting pits. This coliseum where attendees could bet on their prized fighting champion. The Cabal got these champions from capturing beasts from neighboring lands, professional gladiators that fought in the pits, and from nightmare horrors that were summoned by the Cabal's backbone, the Dementia Summoners. So the Dementia Summoners were these pit fighters. They were trained by the Cabal to enter their Dementia space. Now, in the story, the Dementia space is the deepest, darkest part of your mind where you have your innermost fears. These summoners were trained to go into this space and actually summon those fears into the real world, and they would use them to fight for profit. So for the summoner's appearance, they're actually surrounded by this perpetual smoke. The smoke is coming from incense they actually have in their hair. It looks like dreadlocks, so you can see this on cards like Sadistic Hypnotist and even Chainer. Another key part of their appearance is you'll notice all of the Dementia Summoners, including even braids, have goggles that they'll use to mask their appearance when they summon horrors. This way, the horrors won't recognize them in case they seek retribution later. So the Dementia Summoners would actually travel the world looking for inspiration for their next horror. Kind of like an artist traveling the world to inspire their next piece of art. Whoever could summon the biggest, baddest, most horrific nightmare could draw the biggest crowds in the fighting pits and be the next Cabal fighting champion. Now, entering the Dementia space took a huge toll on the summoners, often losing their sanity and becoming mad, damned to serve the Cabal as one of their minions, fighting in the pits and summoning their worst fears. Now that we understand the Cabal and the summoners, let's move on to meeting our hero. Missoura was a young starlet that lived on the outskirts of Cabal City. He sought refuge from the Cabal, and the Cabal, being unable to turn down a vulnerable, potentially profitable resource, accepted Missoura with open arms. He was taught to pit fight by a mostly blind dementia caster, Minat. It was actually Minat who suggested using the weapon that would eventually become Missoura's namesake, the chain. Chainer was trained to imbue his chain of magic, adding spikes and weights at the end, or elongating the chains to add an extra link to color his opponents. Eventually, Chainer was able to create a chain entirely out of magic, not needing a real chain at all. As Chainer showed prowess as a pit fighter, he moved to Cabal City itself to be trained by a true Dementia Master, Skellum. Skellum saw such prowess in Chainer that he knew he would become a true Dementia Master, not just another pit fighter for the Cabal. Hope seemed high for Chainer, until a chance encounter would change the fate of the young Cabalist forever. So while Chainer was exploring an older part of the city, he felt strangely drawn to an old ruined manor. He descended into its basement and found a powerful artifact, the Mirari. This artifact is so packed full of lore, it deserves its own episode. The Mirari showed him visions of his own greatness, promising to tame them if only to utilize its power. Chainer resisted its call, deciding that such a powerful artifact was only fit for the Cabal's Patriarch, the First. Chainer traveled to the Patriarch's palace to deliver the Mirari as an offering, but was stopped by the guardsmen of the Order, the enemy wide-aligned organization, and the nemesis of the Cabal. Major Taro and Officer Bankus were inspecting people entering the city that they suspected were in possession of a dangerous artifact. Chainer fought them off before fleeing to the safety of a Cabal bar and contacting Skellum, who rescued him and had taken him to the Patriarch to present himself. Luckily, the risks Chainer had taken paid off, as the value of Chainer's find and the loyalty he had displayed in taking it to the Patriarch rather than keeping it for himself earned him the First's favor. Chainer then spent most of his time training with Skellum, who showed him how to enter his dementia space and control the creatures there. However, Skellum's training program was interrupted by the beginning of the 3-day Lunar Games, in which the Mirari would be offered as one of the prizes. The Patriarch commanded Chainer to accompany one of the top competitors, the mountain warrior, Cabal.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. That is good. That is good.
He was to show him how to enter the tournament. Initially, Chainer was unhappy with the assignment, but he soon befriended the barbarian as the two taught each other their ways. However, Chainer's assignment was interrupted by a dragon attack on the city. As Cabal ran to aid in the defense, Chainer's mind went straight to the Mirari. He rushed to the vaults to protect it from any opportunistic looters. There, he fought against a group of Order troopers who killed his 2 fellow Cabalists, including his friend Daedry. So in order to defeat the soldiers and their limestone golem, Chainer tapped into the ambient power of the Mirari and unleashed the Death Bloom spell, shattering the golem and killing the Order troops. In the aftermath of the attack, the Mirari was given to Lieutenant Kurtar. Chainer protested about simply giving up such a treasure, but the Patriarch assured him that the orb would soon return to the Cabal, as all valuables eventually did. As Cabal had left the city to chase the Mirari, Chainer resumed his dementia training. Under Skellum's tutelage, he learned how to control the horrors in his mind and transpose them into reality, attaining the rank of caster. After this, Chainer then returned to the pits to gain experience at casting under fighting conditions. There he fought against Cabal's sister, Jessica, and his mentor, Balthar, where he lost his right arm when he was hit by one of Jessica's explosive bolts. He recovered though, receiving an expensive artificial golem arm which was paid for by Skellum. Otherwise, his return to the pits was successful due to his skillful blend of melee fighting and adept summoning. After some time, the Patriarch's prediction about the Mirari proved true. Chainer witnessed its return to the Cabal in the hands of Braids, following its catastrophic use by both the Order and Emperor Aboshan. At this point, Chainer was also reunited with his barbarian friend Cabal, who had been following the Mirari's journey across Otaria. The two formed a pit fighting partnership that scored a record-breaking run of 12 consecutive victories, but was broken when the First ordered them to throw their next match. This went against Cabal's sense of honor and fair play, so he refused to fight and broke off their partnership, although the two still remained friends outside of the pits. Eventually it was decided that Chainer had enough experience to reach the rank of Dementis. Skellum had arranged for Chainer and himself to go on the Shikar Rite of Passage, where Caster would travel into Krosa to discover new inspiration for dementia beasts. However, the Patriarch felt that Skellum was now holding back Chainer's progress, and arranged for the Old Master to die in a pit fight against an Order Crusat squad led by Major Taro. So the Patriarch's plan almost worked perfectly. But last minute, Skellum was able to channel his experience in the fight to show Chainer the Patriarch's betrayal. Chainer was horrified by it and swore revenge against the squad. However, he still went ahead with his Shikar Rite of Passage, taking Cabal with him instead. The ritual went smoothly, and Chainer captured, amongst other things, a wolf monkey and a Grendelkin in memory of Skellum. He also saw a vision of the Cabal's god, Kuber, which he took as a sign of passing the trial. So he and Cabal journeyed back to the Cabal city in triumph. As they returned, Cabal and Chainer were surprised to find Cabal city under attack by the Order. They immediately joined the battle, where Chainer demonstrated his newfound powers by filling the central arena with dementia beasts that slaughtered the invaders in there. With those losses, the Order broke off their attack and fled the city. However, Chainer could not take much satisfaction in his victory as Cabal had been seriously injured in the battle. The Patriarch was most grateful for Chainer's intervention and granted him the right to use the Mirari. However, Chainer wanted to use it twice. Once to heal Cabal, and once to fulfill an agreement he had with Ambassador Rakdos to create them a new champion for the Merfolk people. In order for him to do both, the Patriarch insisted that he get revenge upon the Order's commanding officer for the attack. This happened to be none other than Major Taro. So Chainer carried out this assignment with relish, slaughtering Major Taro, his command corps, all the injured troops recovering in Samite Hospital, and even most of the innocent healers as well. Upon his return, the Patriarch was true to his word and gave the Mirari to Chainer, who then successfully used its power to create Burke for Rakdos, and also healed Cabal by magically grafting snakeskin over his wounds. Rakdos was perfectly satisfied with Chainer's creation, but unfortunately Cabal reacted badly to Chainer's gift. According to his barbarian culture, an injured fighter should recover naturally and learn to fight with whatever he had lost. Cabal chose to burn off his own skin to be rid of the additions rather than become an outcast in his culture. His refusal to accept Chainer's gift ruined his and Chainer's friendship. Following his successful use of the Mirari, Chainer became increasingly important to the Cabal and worked closely with the Patriarch himself. The first had been impressed with Burke and requested that Chainer make a second one to serve as the first bodyguard. However, this time Chainer decided to use the Mirari to get revenge on the last remaining person responsible for Skillem's death, the Patriarch himself. He had made a deal with Rakdos to research the Patriarch's own secret name so that Chainer would weaken him, then used the Mirari to power an enormous death bloom spell that killed all of the Patriarch's bodyguards and attendants. However, the Patriarch himself was immune to the spell due to his pact with the god Cooper, which made him nigh immortal. Instead, Chainer had to settle with forcing him into exile in Aphedo. With the Patriarch removed and Chainer in possession of the Mirari, he took control of Cabal City and finally fulfilled the Mirari's visions that first tempted Chainer. Unfortunately, Chainer's reign was a brief one. He presided over the Mirari games, but these descended into chaos when an Order Justicar and 3 angels appeared during the opening ceremony and tried to take revenge for the murder of Major Tero and the Semites. Chainer became infuriated at the chaos and the idiocy that surrounded him and decided to rebuild the Cabal as he saw fit. He poured power into the Mirari to tap in the dementia space of almost every other dementia caster on Otaria, and brought all the creatures he found there into existence inside of Cabal City. Carnage ensued until Chainer was confronted by the barbarian Cabal, who tried to convince him to stop using the Mirari. The 2 former friends fought, with Chainer easily besting the still injured barbarian. However, Cabal managed to melt Chainer's artificial arm off, which caused Chainer to try to heal himself with the Mirari, as he'd done before with Cabal. The spell went horribly wrong. His arm first became that of an insect, then a fleshy lump. Becoming bored with it all, he attempted to reabsorb all the creatures he created with the Mirari into his body. But Mirari's power finally overwhelmed him, replacing Chainer's entire body with a writhing mass of dementia creatures. The instability and pain of this new horror form was too much, and he gurgled for Cabal to kill him. Cabal did so. Afterwards, all of the horrors he had released disappeared back into their owners' minds, while the Mirari now passed on to Cabal. So that was pretty heavy. So let's see how the lore is represented into the actual cards for Chainer. As far as the art drawn by Mark Zug, I'm getting kind of like these Mortal Kombat inspired vibes. Something that I wish they showed off more in here is actually Chainer's artificial golem arm. You can see it's kind of in the back of the art, and I wish it was in the foreground so we could show it off a little more. You can see his incense covered hair that kind of resemble dreadlocks like I was talking about in the beginning. You also see his signature weapon and the goggles he uses to mask his identity to his horror summons. As far as Chainer's color identity, mono black makes perfect sense here. True to the ambitions of both the Cabal and Chainer himself, and the willingness to gain power at any cost once he was corrupted by the Mirari. Chainer's creature type, human minion. A minion is a creature class used to depict those who do the will of overtly evil organizations, such as Chainer does for the Cabal. That first line of text, all nightmares get +1/+1. This nightmare anthem is an awesome homage to Chainer creating a new breed of horrors, nightmare horrors. So all dementia summoners were able to create these potent horrors. But Chainer's newest creations were more hideously powerful than anyone could imagine. So powerful, they literally scared something out of anyone who saw them, creating even more horrors. His second ability, 3 black, pay 3 life. 1 black mana for each rank leading up to Dementia Master. Dementia Kabbalist, Dementia Summoner, and Dementia Master. Paying life is a toll Dementists pay to harness the darkest part of their minds and face their innermost horrors. Being able to take a creature card from any graveyard and it becoming a black nightmare in addition to its other creature types is like Chainer pouring all of his mana into the Mirari, as he pulls horrors from all other Dementia Summoners' minds and pulls them into existence. The Dementists summon twisted horror versions of real creatures and things that they fear, so them becoming nightmares and creatures themselves is also on flavor. When Chainer dies, remove all nightmares from the game. In the last scene of Chainer's Torment, when he is killed by Cabal, all of the horrors Chainer had summoned went back into their own minds, exiling them. Overall, I give Chainer the Dementia Master a flavor score of 9 out of 10. I think his activated abilities pay perfect homage to Chainer's story and him being a dementia caster. Really the only miss there, I think, is a bit of the art. I think I imagined Chainer a little differently, and some of the things that made him really unique and cool aren't as emphasized as much, especially with his artificial golem arm being in the back and honestly blending in with a lot of the rest of his outfit. Chainer wasn't as hot as maybe Yawgmoth the Threatened Physician was. The next card review is Chainer's Edict. Here the art shows Chainer defeating Major Tero, the bird creature who served the Order and tried to stop Chainer from entering the city when he held the Mirari. Awesome homage to the scene here. As far as the ability, target player sacrifices a creature. Now this is a very black sorcery spell, but could be associated with the Cabal and their dastardly ways. However, it is a pretty generic black spell to be associated with Chainer himself. So as far as the second ability having flashback, flashback makes more sense flavor-wise in the time spiral block, since there are literal flashbacks of past scenes. I don't see a very strong association with Chainer and the Odyssey block to this mechanic. Now, one of the Chainer's Edict cards does have a flavor text. The pits have their own form of mercy. Now, this is probably the coolest part of this card. Overall, I'd say I'd give Chainer's Edict a flavor score of about 5 out of 10. I think you could really staple this effect onto any card and name it anything else and it would still make sense. Really, the only redeeming quality is the art and the flavor text. For our next card review, we have the Saga Chainer's Torment. Now, sagas are just awesome flavor-wise, period. And this is aptly named for Chainer's book, Chainer's Torment. So upkeep 1 and 2. Chainer's Torment deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. This is a pretty generic black effect with it dealing with parasitism. I don't see a huge element to the story here. Upkeep 3. Create an XX Black Nightmare Horror creature token where X is half your life total rounded up. It deals X damage to you. There you go, creating a huge Black Nightmare Horror creature meant to represent Chainer trying to cast another spell with the Mirari, but instead he absorbs all of the horrors he summoned and becomes a horrifying abomination. This was pretty much the act that killed Chainer when Cabal Mercy killed him, which explains that it deals X damage to you apart. Now here's my favorite part about this card, the art. It's fucking awesome. I mean, it's definitely H.R. Geiger inspired and really captures the horror of the nightmare creatures summoned from the dementia space. Mirari being on top of the card and Chainer being pulled to shreds in the middle. Now as far as the flavor score on this, I'd love to give it a 10 out of 10, but honestly those first 2 upkeeps are just really generic. But between the art and that last effect, perfectly capturing the last scene of Chainer's Torment, it's definitely a huge flavor win. Okay, for our final card review, the new Chainer's Nightmare Adept card that was spoiled for Commander 2019. Here we have a new take on Chainer's appearance from Steve Prescott. The name and appearance tell us this is a younger version of Chainer, still an adept in mastering his dementia space, probably shortly after encountering the Mirari and refusing its temptations. In the art, the nightmare snakes pay an awesome homage to Chainer. When Chainer was young, he had a debilitating phobia of snakes. When he was training his dementia summoning, he turned his fear of snakes into a vicious weapon, as seen here. His first ability, discard a card, cast a creature. Okay, this is really cool. So in this story, it talks about how much of a toll on your sanity it takes to enter your dementia space. I've always seen your hand and library in a game of Magic as your mind and the knowledge that you hold. So to exchange this, a part of your mind, to summon a creature makes perfect sense. Additionally, in some of the old school lore, it is explained that as a planeswalker summoner, you're not casting the actual creature, you're only casting a memory of it. So to hurt yourself to summon a memory, a bad, nightmarish one that you fear, is another flavor win. So as far as his second ability, giving haste to anything that wasn't cast from your hand, when I think of summoning sickness in the game, it's always been pretty literal. A creature's manifested out of nowhere, and it takes a moment to realize what's happening. So for me, haste is a very violent tendency, that before a creature even takes in its surroundings, they're already on the offensive. Here I imagine Chainer summoning one of his nightmares. They've been waiting in the dark recesses of your mind, ready to strike, and do so immediately when given the chance. Finally, Chainer's color identity. I've been admittedly stumped since this card was spoiled. The Cabal and the Dementis are definitely mono black. They embody it perfectly. So a high-ranking Dementis like Chainer being the same makes perfect sense. So why is it when he's younger, he's a Rakdos character? My theory for this color change is that Chainer, or Missoura, was actually mono red. Him being mono red would make perfect sense. Chainer's drive and his passion to do so well for himself are all classic traits of that color. But more compelling than that is Chainer shows one of Red's key traits, rebellion. Chainer was one of the only people to rebel against the Mirari's temptations when first shown the great visions of him ruling the Cabal. I think only later in his dementia training, and he was acclimating to the Cabal organization, was Black introduced to his color identity. More and more, he was inheriting the values of the Cabal organization. Him as a Nightmare Adept, we see half and half. We still see that part of him, the passion and the rebellion, but he's also taking in some of these Cabal values, which is why we see both here, him as a Rakdos character. Only later in the story, when he's fully corrupted by the Mirari, do we see him truly lose his identity as a Red character. So as far as the flavor rating, if my theory's right, I would give this card a 10 out of 10. Maybe I'm forcing it into a 10 out of 10 because of my theory, but if it's right, I think everything makes sense here. Now, if my theory's wrong, and they just gave him red to fit the Merciless Rage deck, it definitely loses a couple flavor points there. Now, thanks so much for joining us on another Legendary Creature Spotlight. Now, if you like this video, please hit the like button and hit subscribe. You can check out more of our content from gameplay videos and Andy and Kyle's podcast. Until the next episode, I'll see you next time.